I am joined by Emily Madero, the president and CEO of the French Quarter Fest. We're going to talk a little bit real quick about the festival, what's going to be happening. And so thank you very much for taking some time to talk to us about this.
Thank you. We're excited.
Yeah, it's my favorite festival in the city every single year.
You have very good taste.
French Quarter Fest. Yeah, clearly. Why don't you give us a little bit of a quick, thumbnail history of the festival?
Yeah, I can talk about the origin story. It's a fun one. I was actually just on the phone with John Boutte, and there's so many artists and politicians and neighbors that all kind of had a hand in that very early, the first couple of years. He was sharing a story about his sister Lillian singing on the steps of the Jazz Museum. But basically, the first French Quarter Festival happened in 1984, and there had been a bunch of construction getting the city ready to host the World's Fair at the time. So not unlike what we see in some areas of the French Quarter with street disruptions and closures due to construction, there were some businesses that had really suffered from sidewalks being torn up and streets being torn up. So the mayor at the time, Dutch Morial, got together with some other businessmen and women here in the city, and they said, well, let's throw a party. New Orleans is really great about communities coming together, and let's encourage locals to come back to the French Quarter. And this is such an incredible, iconic neighborhood, unlike anywhere else in the country. It's really this, historic, beautiful setting. And it was a one afternoon. I think Richard Simmons was the MC on year one. And there was lots of also very cool things that we were able to do in the early years, like NOFD and NOPD used to do a tug of war every year. Oh, wow. There was all sorts of, we had skydivers come land on Decatur Street. So as the festival has grown, we've been able to, expand all of the music and the food that you see there, but we have little less opportunities for dropping people from the sky into the French Quarter. But that same, origin story and founding mission. We're a nonprofit organization. A lot of people don't necessarily know that there's a mission behind the party, but really our purpose is to elevate and uplift the local creatives and our cultural economy. And so everything that we do is through the lens of celebrating our local culture, really focusing on local musicians, working musicians, people who live and make a living out of creating music here, and also celebrating our local culinary chefs. But we want to make sure that we're creating all of this world-class programming in a way that everybody can participate. So it's a very, no barriers, no admissions. Everything we do is free and open to the public, and really wanting to maximize the economic benefit to the city. So
you mentioned the construction that sort of helped prompt the first one, and again, we do have a bunch going on now. How is what's going on with Sewer Water Board and all that impacting the festival this year?
Yeah, first and foremost, they've been, really incredible in terms of coordinating communications. So we've been monitoring the situation for many, many months, and they've been tremendous in terms of all the different utilities and government agencies coordinating. So as far as the festival is concerned, it shouldn't impact you very much at all. Certainly things are starting to open up. There will be some road closures further down on Decatur Street still, but typically we don't keep that open to traffic anyway. The NOPD makes sure right about 1 o'clock they do a closure of the interior of the French Quarter, and that's just to make sure that we're keeping everybody safe and really minimizing any kind of interactions between pedestrians and cars. So when you come out here, I always encourage people. I live right on the West Bank behind the Algiers courthouse, so I arrive on ferry, which is a great way to commute to the festival. We've got streetcar connections. Take a bus, take an Uber. It's a safer, happier way to arrive to a festival. Grab a blue bike. There's plenty of bikes available throughout the neighborhood.
Yeah, that way you can drink. You don't have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about trying to park, which is insane anyway, just on a regular day. So yeah. What you guys have expanded the footprint pretty dramatically over the last couple of years. Physically, walk me through a little bit of kind of what the changes have been and sort of what the impetus, I guess, maybe was. Was it crowds or was it just...
Sure. I think we're always looking at things through a couple of different lenses, right? We get feedback constantly from the community, from the neighborhood, from our vendors that are out there. And we really try to take notes every year on how we can continue to grow and improve the festival experience year over year. So on any given year, there's always tweaks that we'll be doing to make sure that if we saw a bottleneck in one area, we're able to address that moving forward. But we're here in the middle of a living neighborhood, right? So there's always new things happening in the neighborhood. You know, there's typically construction. Last year we had the Canal Plaza right in front of the aquarium was under construction. That is now really a beautifully renovated space. If you haven't been down there, they've done some landscaping and created green spaces and some trees. So that's going to be a really great place for festival attendees to be able to participate. So some of it is, accommodating what kind of improvements or projects might be happening in the neighborhood. And other times, like this year with the opening of the Goldring-Waldenberg Park down at Governor Nichols Wharf, it's an opportunity for us to move into a space that is a little bit more purpose-built for hosting big events. It's a really great way, I think, for people to experience the riverfront right there at the foot of Esplanade, right across from the Jazz Museum. You can enter. It's a big new green space. It's a really beautiful space. So, I think it's a little bit of constantly trying to improve the festival experience, thinking about the programming and what that looks like. We used to have the Pan American Life Stage. We originally built it right on the Mississippi on the Moonwalk. And it was this great little enclave because, of course, it features some great world music. But, crowds got bigger over time, and so that is also moving down to Governor Nichols Wharf because we want people to be able to spread out and enjoy themselves and have a good time. And if we're doing our job right, people aren't thinking about logistics and navigating the festival. They're just enjoying spending time with their friends and hearing great music.
You mentioned accommodation, and one thing that I've noticed over the years that is, I guess I never had put it together, but it does. Things change, like the layout, it's never exactly the same. And it does seem that like a place where you're like, oh, last year you don't want to, it was a nightmare trying to get through this spot because those crowds would get really thick.
Yeah.
And it's not like that the next year, which is fascinating. I feel like a lot of other places, a lot of other events don't necessarily sort of do that. They just sort of anticipate that or assume, I guess, that people will adjust.
It's a double-edged sword because I think you want to preserve the traditions and the things that are working. And people are creatures of habit. So if they're used to getting their Crescendolay po' boy in a certain spot or going to see, their favorite, brass band down at the Jazz Museum, you want to make sure that the festival and the experience is easy to navigate and familiar in that way. And at the same time, like you said, this is a fluid neighborhood, right? And I think that there's opportunities for us as festival producers to always be thinking of ways to improve the experience, to integrate better with the neighborhood, to, dovetail or support our partners and whatever their strategic priorities are. So I think we're always trying to carry the festival experience forward. And so it's never going to be exactly the same. We want it to be familiar and sort of that same beloved tradition. But obviously the music scene is constantly evolving, and the culinary scene is, culture isn't a static thing.
Exactly.
And certainly a neighborhood isn't either.
Well, and that's, it's funny that you mentioned that because one of the things that I thought was most interesting over the last few years is y'all's been very sort of mindful about bringing in hip hop, DJs, music that is not what I think people would traditionally consider to be New Orleans music or certainly French Quarter Fest music, And I think it's been a big benefit. I think, it expands the sort of musical range, I guess, of the festival, but it also reflects the community in a way that I think a lot of times I feel like people get stuck in their wheelhouse, and that's all.
I think if we're doing our job right, our programming should reflect the music coming out of the city right now, and that's always going to be constantly evolving. So, I think we have a really incredible entertainment committee. We have a staff of 8, and obviously everybody has a voice here, but we really try to stay plugged in and get feedback from fans and our participants and a broader set, so that we can, we want to be a celebration and a reflection of just the incredible depth of talent that we have here.
Is it hard, or I don't know, is it challenging doing a festival where you're not trying to keep people necessarily in the festival, right?
Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really interesting because I think you're hitting on a point where, from a mission standpoint, our goal is to support the musicians and the local businesses, and if we're doing our job right, sort of all ships rise, right? On rainy days, it's not necessarily the best thing for us if we have to shut down temporarily or if it gets really rainy, but it's a great thing for all the restaurants and the bars in the neighborhood. So there's sort of this give and take and this synergy. Obviously it's a free event, and most live events, you got a couple of different sources of revenue, right? You got sponsorship, you've got your food and beverage sales, and you've got tickets. Well, we've taken tickets off the table, so we need to be really careful and thoughtful and creative to make sure that we're able to raise the dollars that we need to put on this big festival every year. So we're super grateful for all of our sponsors that make that possible, and for everybody who's out there and might buy in a bead of beer or some merchandise that definitely goes back to the festival. But certainly we want people getting out into the neighborhood, and even as locals, sometimes we forget what treasures are right here.
Yeah.
When I started taking the ferry or riding my bike to work, you just notice things in a really different way than if you're commuting and trying to get from point A to point B. And hopefully the festival serves as not only a way to maybe discover a new band or try something, from a restaurant in the East that you hadn't been to yet, but there's so many great, historic properties. You can go catch Andre Boren play at the BK House,
right,
and you're in this incredible little, courtyard. So hopefully it's a way that, not only visitors can appreciate the city, but locals as well can kind of rediscover what's already here.
I think, I know talking to business owners in the quarter, like a lot of times over the last few years, they felt like they've been kind of shut out a lot of the time when it comes to big events that come to town. Like the Super Bowl really was not the economic driver that I think a lot of people were hoping it was going to be. And it's a vital thing to bring people into the neighborhood and to get people out in the streets.
Yeah, we are the little engine that could. There are 8 team members that put this event on. We're supported by a volunteer board of about 30 people. But it really is a labor of love. And what we're hearing back from our partners is that second to Mardi Gras, it's the busiest week in the quarter. So whether you are a restaurant or a hotel or a brick and mortar, so we want to make sure that that's something that we can preserve. We know it's a really important thing for the city.
Are there any new things that people should know about this year with the festival, other than the expansion, obviously, into the park?
Come first and foremost. The Governor Nichols Wharf Park is really beautiful. I just came from a ribbon cutting over there. It's open for the first time to the public starting this week, and the festival will be the first major event to activate it. So that's going to be an incredible asset for the city, and definitely expands access to the river, to French Quarter Festival, and to the French Quarter. You can get all the way from the Marigny to downtown, right here on the riverfront. So that's a big one. We're going to have the Jack Daniel's stage down there. We're going to have the Pan American Life Insurance Group stage down there. So some world music, some eclectic sets will be really great. The other thing is, we are a progressive opening. So we are Thursday, April 16th to Sunday, April 19th. And as the festival grows, we'll start with 8 stages along the riverfront and in Jackson Square, and then we grow to 14 stages as things open up at Friday at the Jazz Museum and in the French Market, and then by Saturday, Sunday, we'll have 20 stages up and down Royal Street and all over the place. So we have a couple new events this year. For those who might want to start their day early and, get in some steps before they eat a bunch of rich food, we're doing a 5K. LCMC Health is our official healthcare partner, and we were thinking about, well, what's a new tradition that we can bring back to the festival? For years and years, the Little Red Schoolhouse used to do a 5K, and that I don't know what happened, but for some reason it sort of fell off of the festival schedule, and we're bringing it back. So Saturday morning, April 18th, come walk with your friends or run if you're more of a competitive type. But it will be a cool way. The route actually goes through the festival footprint along the riverfront and then down into Crescent Park. So nice. It will be a fun little route. But yeah, wear comfortable shoes, bring your best attitude, have a good time, download the app so that you have all that information in your back pocket whenever you need it. There are a record number of food vendors out there this year, so there's something like 275 menu items to choose from.
God, wow.
Yeah. Over 300 acts, so we'll keep you busy Thursday through Sunday. But leave your coolers at home, wear your comfortable shoes, and have a good time.
I got one more quick question for you on the festival world in general, because the last few years we've seen most festivals are shrinking. Or going away altogether. Like Bonnaroo, I think is just like one stage now, and like it's two days instead of a week-long thing or whatever. And you guys are expanding. You're expanding dramatically. Like, what's that about? Why are you guys so different than everybody else?
I don't know if you've ever seen that Dirty Coast T-shirt, but it says "So far behind, we're ahead," and you have the evolution. I often think of that because as a small resource-constrained nonprofit, oftentimes it feels like, we never have enough to do what we would love to do. And at the same time, I've been to so many different events with colleagues at peer festivals, and I think it's a tough time for festivals in general. For a long time, if you go back 15 years, there was a lot of investment capital going into large events as a big business. Fast forward through the pandemic, there's a lot more risk factors involved. It's a tough business to be in. However, we're a nonprofit organization, so there are some things about that, while we want to make sure that we are on the forefront of paying our local working musicians well, we're not necessarily bringing in globally touring acts, right? So our niche is the bands that are up and coming, and once you are touring, you're probably beyond what we can support anyway. We're sort of the launching pad. And so there are some dynamics that not only make it a little easier on us to be able to sort of weather some of the macroeconomic challenges that are making the four festivals have a hard time. But I would say the other thing is, our decision-making matrix and our mission is totally different, right? So it's not about bottom line.
Right.
It's about bottom line for the city. We're supporting $350 million worth of economic impact. I feel a real obligation to maintain that. That's an important part of our city's GDP and something that I know the businesses in the quarter plan around all year long. We are bringing, an entire community out and hiring 300 acts. So part of, I think, the magic or the alchemy of the experience as a festival attendee is just the sheer diversity and scale of what you can come and experience and enjoy. It's not necessarily an event that's driven by one headliner. It's the fact that there's so many different genres and acts and, you know, experiences within the experience. If you're going to go check out, you know, John Boutte play at Jackson Square, that's going to be really different than what might be happening in the songwriter stage on the third floor of the Jazz Museum, or Irma Thomas playing out on the riverfront. So, yeah, I think, you know, we have a lot of passion and an obligation to keep what we do moving forward and keep it strong, and so hopefully we'll be able to continue to rely on our festival attendees to help support that, and our sponsors. And
I mean, it feels like you're doing a pretty good job so far. So, yeah. How much of the attendees are coming from out of town? Is it a lot of them, or? So
we work with UNO Hospitality Research Institute to help us get feedback on how we're doing and what impact the event is having. And their estimate is about 60% of our attendees are out of town. And that's out of the New Orleans metro area.
Right.
So nearly half of the people at the festival are really from, you know, New Orleans metro. The next sort of largest group is Louisiana, but outside of the New Orleans metro area. And then I would say, you know, the remaining 50% is, it mimics sort of what the visitorship for New Orleans in general look like. So we have lots of Gulf Coast people that drive in for the weekend, but we also have pretty loyal following from, you know, New York and California and Chicago and even internationally.
Cool. Well, look, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about this. This has been great. Appreciate you.
It's been fun. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.